Hi, I hope you're having a great day. You're listening to TechFest Talks, a podcast by students for students. My name is Rory McIver, and I'm a sixth-year student at Portlethen Academy. I'm extremely excited to be speaking to ethical hacker Mo Keir from the Scottish Business Resilience Centre today. Good morning, Mo.
Good morning.
Nice to meet you. Is ethical hacking and cybersecurity something that has interested you since a young age? If not, what industry did you originally see yourself going into?
Actually, it didn't at all. I should say I'm a mature student at Abertay University, so I'm a bit older than your average student there. No, growing up, I was kind of into Lego and then building things, and ultimately got into a degree in engineering at Edinburgh, but I dropped out of just because I decided over the course of 2 years that I really didn't want to be an engineer. But I did find a role as a technician at a company based up in Aberdeen. And during that time, I was an oil and gas based industry basically, and there was the oil price crash of 2015, 2016, and I was in a department of 3 people doing the work. There was barely enough work for one person. I could kind of see the writing on the wall, but there happened to be an opening in the IT department of that same organisation. It was a very low level opening, but it looked like a lifeboat, and I knew the person I'd be working with, my boss, who I liked quite a lot. So I shifted departments, and that was the start of my career in, at least in IT, but of course ultimately led into my my now vocation in cybersecurity.
That's really interesting, thanks. And as an ever-growing industry, when is it that you first learned about the job of ethical hacking?
When I joined the IT department, I was what you call an application support worker. So that's literally the guy who just crawls around under desks, plugging things in. It was really, really low level. But my boss, Jeff, was hyper competent, doing it for years, documented everything he did, was one of the best IT guys I've ever worked with. And he taught me a huge amount. And I think about a year into the job, he showed me all the people knocking on so he showed me the kind of a raw feed of people trying to connect to our business through the firewall. And you could just see the thousands of attempts, people basically kind of knocking on the door to see if it would open. And that's when I realized just how big the issue of cybersecurity was, something I hadn't really thought about for our business before, at least not in that way. So at that point, I was getting quite good at IT, and I thought, actually, I want to do this for a job. And I was also coming to the realization that in today's job market, you kind of need a degree. You know, a lot of people, again, it was oil and gas, a lot of people being laid off in that time, and it seemed to be that people without degrees were more likely to lose their jobs than people with degrees. So I resolved to go back to university, and because of Jeff showing me that little insight into cybersecurity, I thought actually maybe that's the role for me. So I looked at courses that were cybersecurity focused, and I found ethical hacking at Abertay, and I decided, yeah, that's what I want to do.
So what is it that intrigued you about this line of work?
Part of it had to be the fact that cybersecurity professionals tend to get paid a bit more than their counterparts in the rest of the IT industry. I don't think that's true anymore. I think pay levels are kind of leveled out, which is an awkward way of saying that. So that was certainly part of it. And a lot of people get into cybersecurity say straight up that they're interested in the money. However, I don't think that's enough. Like, one thing that's really interesting about cybersecurity as a problem, it's a human problem in that your adversaries are actual hackers. They're clever people who are trying to work out how to break into your systems in new and unique ways. And that kind of puzzle is really, really interesting to me. When you're mitigating against most risks, you can kind of identify what's going to go wrong, and then you generate costs. So how much will it cost to protect against this? And then you go ahead and do that work. And while there are still unforeseen consequences that can strike anyone or anything, it's a lot easier to kind of understand where your risks are. And that's not really true in cyber. I mean, your business can be humming along happily, and then some organization in Ukraine gets attacked, and suddenly a piece of vital software that you rely upon but never really looked at closely gets compromised by an attacker, and your whole network falls over as a result. And protecting against that is a very interesting problem.
That's really interesting. So could you tell us a little bit about the process of you giving up your previous job as a systems administrator to enroll onto the ethical hacking course at Abertay University?
Yes, so a couple of things happened. My immediate boss, who I was working under, who taught me a lot, he moved on to another organization, and I got kind of essentially promoted into his role because of that. It didn't come with a pay rise, unfortunately, but I did inherit his responsibility. And fortunately, as I said, Jeff was hyper competent. He documented everything. I had all his playbooks, and I could keep the network ticking over at the organization I was working for. But during that time, I began to realize I was really out of my depth. I could keep things running, but the CEO came to me one day and said, look, we're looking at doing cloud deployment. What do you think about that? And I had to be honest. I had to say, I have no idea. I don't know how to build a system from the ground up. And it was that realization made me think, right, I really need to go back and learn how to do this job properly. And my boss, my boss's boss, who then became my boss, he was very supportive of me going back to university. In fact, his name was Graham, and he just encouraged me to really consider it, look at things. He didn't mind me going away for prospect to go do the open days and that kind of thing. And it was that encouragement and support that really let me take the leap and give up my salary, which wasn't that bad, and go back to earning pretty much nothing as a student to take the job seriously. And the other side of that equation was Abertay itself. Abertay has this really wonderful environment for learning. They have an understanding that a lot of people come to Abertay as kind of a second chance, or they've messed up what they wanted to do first time around. There's absolutely no judgment there. The courses that they run are really hands-on as well. They'll teach you the theory, but what really attracts me to Abertay, and what attracts a lot of people to courses at Abertay, is the fact that most of the coursework you do is all very much practical. It's not a case of having to go and write an essay about some attack that happened in the past. They give you a system, and your exam is, can you break into this over the course of a week? Can you document it properly? Can you tell us what you did and what you learned on the way? Which I think is the best way of learning, first of all. And it's engendered a really positive atmosphere where people are all getting stuck into the problems. They're all working with each other. They're bouncing ideas off each other. They're sharing things they found. And as a result, altogether, we learn a hell of a lot more than I think anyone would on their own.
Mm-hmm. So now you work in the Scottish Business Resilience Centre while you're a student as well. So can you tell me a little bit about your role here and what it entails?
Yes. So quite early on in my course, I got recommended I have a look at this organisation called the Scottish Business Resilience Centre, which beforehand I had never heard of, but had actually been around for almost a decade at that point. It's a non-profit, and it's principally funded by the Scottish Government, but also Scottish business partners that we have, some large organisations, some small. And it's made up of seconded police officers, ethical hacking students, and some professional cybersecurity people as well. And it exists to advise businesses on a range of risks around security, physical security, as well as cybersecurity, provide training, but also provide testing and other things as well, which we'll go into in a bit. My role as an ethical hacker is principally just training. So I do a lot of presentations. I go out to a lot of organizations, or over COVID, I ran a lot of webinars where we talked about current issues in cyber and what organizations could do about that. We run what we call vulnerability testing. So that's where we send an ethical hacker into your office, and we plug our laptop into your network and we scan it for vulnerabilities. So we're looking for unpatched software. We're looking for things that are connected to the internet that probably shouldn't be. Printers are a huge part of our business. A lot of organizations, the printer gets installed by someone from Xerox or whatever. It sits in the office, in the corner of the office for years being used. It never gets patched. It never gets updated. And we find that they're a really vulnerable point in a lot of networks that can be attacked. Or you can just literally walk up to a printer, look at its print history, and pull out any financial documents you find and just print them off and take them home if you want to. We do some other stuff as well. We run what we call tabletop exercises. So that's kind of like training, but what we do is we sit with a small group of people and we go through a scenario. So you're going to be attacked by ransomware. We actually offer that as a free service, which I'll probably talk about a bit more in a bit. But we also do bespoke tabletop exercises as well, where organizations who have particular networks can come to us and we can dream up a scenario to go through with their staff. And we do things like phishing exercises where we'll draft malicious emails to send staff to see if we can trick them into giving up their credentials. And in that way, we can identify people who need further training, and we can just show them, look, this is what you clicked on, this is the kind of attack it could lead to. And we find that understanding really helps people take cyber more seriously. Even if their role isn't within that organization, isn't anything to do with IT, they usually have enough exposure to IT equipment that they need a degree of training in order to use it safely.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. So what sort of cybersecurity threats have you found that businesses are most commonly facing during your time working?
So one of the big ones one of the biggest ones is ransomware. So just briefly, a ransomware is a type of malware. What it does is it'll get onto your network or an organization's network, usually on a computer that's not that well patched. And then it'll try and spread around the network, infect everything. And then at some predetermined time, or the attacker might be communicating with this piece of malware, they'll hit a button and that malware will encrypt the hard drive, all the data on that machine. And then users come along, they turn that machine on, instead of getting their normal computer or their files, they just see a message that says, we've locked down your computer and you need to pay us X amount of money, usually in Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency, and we'll provide the decryption key. And the reason why this is the number one kind of threat at the moment, at least one of the biggest threats we've seen, is because it's very profitable for hackers. It's a way for them to make money. It's relatively simple to do as well. I mean, you can just go ahead and find examples of ransomware on the internet, which you could download. I would not recommend doing that, but it's very, very easy for an attacker to set up. And it's absolutely devastating for organizations to get infected. The other thing that they need to worry about, organizations across the world need to worry about, is business email compromise. So that's where an attacker gets control of your email account, basically by stealing your credentials. The reason why this is a big threat, number one, they can just use your email account, send fraudulent emails to other people in your company. So they get onto your email, they send something to the finance department asking for a bill to be paid, and of course that money gets sent to the attacker. Or they can try and work their way through to your vendors or your suppliers or your customers. They'll pretend to be you and try and send a dodgy document to one of your stakeholders. They open that document, and then that gives the hacker access to that other organization, which can be incredibly embarrassing for you. That other organization realized it was hacked and it was because of your email account being compromised. Well, that can lead to a lot of resentment. And finally, one thing we have to consider is that our email account is kind of like the keys to our digital kingdom. Whenever you tell me, if you ever forget your password on a website, what do you do?
I have to really go back and think about what different passwords I could have used, but I think in this day and age, all the thumbprints and facial recognitions, I don't know if that's more of a risk or less of a risk.
Oh, no, I would say that's less of a risk. I think what I was getting at is most people hit the forgot password button.
Yeah, and get it emailed to you.
Exactly. So if the attacker controls your emails, what they do is they then log into every other account they can think of. They know your email address, and they just hit the forgot password button. And then that way they can get into all the rest of your accounts.
Yeah, that's really risky, actually.
Hugely risky, and it's very, very effective. So locking down your business email is very, very important. And then finally, the last thing I would worry about is just your more kind of generic attack. So this is where a hacker would try and break into your network just to see what they can steal. It tends to be a lot more hands-on for the attacker, and the attacker will need to invest quite a lot of time and resources into doing something like that. But if you're an organization that handles a lot of sensitive data, or if your data is particularly valuable to you because you've got a lot of technology there that you don't want your rivals to see, it could be certain trading algorithms or something like that, just for example, that's something that attackers would certainly be interested in. If your data is valuable, then an attacker might break in and try and what we call exfiltrate that, which literally just means download it back to their own computer. And in that case, you're dealing with a very different kind of attack because it's so hands-on. You're dealing with a person actually on your network trying not to be spotted. And it's a much more challenging proposition, and you need a much closer level of inspection of your own network to recognize that. That's for really scary stuff. But if your organization doesn't handle sensitive data, then I would worry less about that and more about ransomware and business email compromise.
Interesting. So, in this modern technological world, what can a business do to tighten their security and protect themselves from all these threats online?
Well, first of all, start taking security seriously and absolutely dump the notion that it won't happen to us. That we see a lot of organizations, they think they're too small, or they don't handle enough money, or they're not that interesting, or they have a very small web presence, or whatever. The point is, if you're running computers, and if a large part of your business relies on computers or any other information technology, you absolutely could be a target to a hacker. Remember, most hackers, they live in places like they could be living in Belarus, they could be living in Venezuela. The fact that your organization is located in the UK means that they will consider you a wealthy target, someone who has money in the bank and someone who they can probably extract funds from. So everyone in the United Kingdom becomes a much more viable target as a result. However, there are a few things working in your favor, especially when we're talking about low-level hackers, lone wolves, if you like, guys who just sit at their computer all day seeing if they can make any money. First of all, time is money for these guys. If they're working away trying to hack an organization and they're getting nowhere, they're not going to make rent. So they'll usually cut their losses and move on to something else because there are millions of organizations out in the world. It's a target-rich environment. If they're not getting anywhere with your organization, they'll just move on to another one, which really helps in your favor. So the more you invest in your own cybersecurity, the less of a target you'll become. That's the first thing to consider. Secondly of all, there's a lot of things you can do in terms of cybersecurity or enhancing your cybersecurity, which are basically free. And probably the best thing you can do is, please, for the love of God, patch your software, update your software. If your computer says that it needs an update, go ahead and run that all across your business. Most hackers rely on what we call known vulnerabilities. So someone has identified a vulnerability in a piece of software that can allow a hacker to break into that piece of software and then maybe break into your computer, break into your network. Because they're known vulnerabilities, most software developers will rush out patches, security patches, to fix this. And so long as you apply those, you're no longer at risk from these vulnerabilities. Patches, they only cost you time. All you have to do is hit update and then go away and make yourself a cup of coffee. And more than anything else, they will do a lot to enhance your cybersecurity. But you need to keep on top of them. It's not good enough anymore to say, we'll run the patches a month after the fact. That's what we used to do in the olden days, because we used to patch our computers and then that would break other things and lead to all sorts of headaches, and we'd wait for more stable patches to appear. I would say at this point, you should be patching. Maybe, you can leave it for a week or 2 weeks if you really want to, but the sooner you get those patches, the sooner you will become secure. The next thing, also free, or generally free to set up, is two-factor authentication for your staff's business emails. As I said, business email compromise is one of the biggest risks facing your organization. 2FA is a system whereby, I think you mentioned it earlier, where you do something where you, when you log into a website, you put in your username, your password, and then you have to put in a code from your phone, or you have to put in a fingerprint or facial recognition, something like that. The reason why this is really, really good is an attacker might get your password, they might get your email address, but they won't get their hands on your phone. Again, these guys might be from Venezuela. There's no way they're going to break into your house and steal your phone. And if they don't have that third piece of equipment in their hands, they cannot get into your business email. So that, again, makes it much, much, much harder for an attacker to get your stuff. And finally, the other thing I was seriously considering, at least of a free kind of bracket, is phishing. So phishing is the process of sending fraudulent emails. Remember, it costs nothing to send an email. It costs nothing to send 100 million emails. If I send out 100 million emails asking people to give me their credit card details, 1 in 100 million people will probably send me their credit card details, and then I can use that to extract some money off them. A couple of things we can do to avoid these kinds of attacks. Number one, let's make sure we have spam filtering in place for our organization. There's no reason why our staff should see spam emails. Let's not risk them clicking on anything that they shouldn't. Secondly, though, we need to worry about what's called spear phishing. So this is where I, as a hacker, identify someone within your organization and send them a specially crafted email. Maybe I'll pretend to be a colleague and say, hey, I've locked myself out of my emails again. I'm just using my personal email. Can you check this document? And of course, the staff opens the document and there's a virus on it. This is an example that happens all too often. To protect against that, what you really need to be doing is training your staff to identify phishing and telling them what they can do about it. For instance, if they get a dodgy email that's pretending to be from a colleague of theirs, make sure that they have a contact number so you can call that colleague and say, hey, I just got an email from you. Is this legitimate? If it isn't, you'll stop that attack in its tracks. When it comes to supplying that kind of training, there's a couple of things you can do. You can go through the SBRC, Scottish Business Resilience Centre. We run a thing called Exercise in a Box. It's usually twice a week. Unfortunately, it's coming to an end at the end of this month, but hopefully it'll start up again soon, where twice a week, or at least once a week, we offer a session that you can join for free with your staff. You'll sit with an ethical hacker and we'll go through a phishing scenario and we'll talk about how to identify phishing emails and what you can do about them, things like that. Alternatively, Exercise in the Box was originally dreamt up by NCSC, the National Cybersecurity Centre. You can go onto the NCSC website or just Google Exercise in the Box and you can download all the stuff for free from their website and run your own training exercises. It's really valuable. It gets staff engaged. You can talk about cyber and you can show them the aftermath of an attack as well. You can show why it's risky clicking on a dodgy document. And once people have that knowledge, they'll be much more judicious about what they open and how they handle themselves around dodgy-looking emails.
Thank you. I'm sure that's all been great information for businesses listening to this podcast to take note of. So, what sort of projects have attracted you most since you started your career in ethical hacking?
Well, in terms of working with the SBRC, quite recently I did what's called a phishing exercise. That was a lot of fun. So what we did was an organization came to us and they said, can you send out some dodgy emails to our staff so we can identify who's clicking on them? We've given them a load of training and we kind of consider this a test of their ability. That was really interesting because then I got to sit on the other side of that. Normally I'm thinking I think like a cybersecurity defender, if you like. And it made me appreciate a lot more just how important the human element of cybersecurity is. I get very focused on the technical side of things, how dodgy software, how computers work, how you can kind of subvert processes. But actually, the way you really, I would say, break into organizations is by tricking people. It sounds a bit mean, but if you can take advantage of the fact that most people are nice, if you ask them for help or assistance in some way, most people will try their best to help you and take advantage of that. You can do a lot of damage as an attacker. We were sending out emails asking people to do essentially the right. So what we did was we sent out an email pretending to be an African prince or a Nigerian prince. Sorry, we've all seen this kind of email. They're kind of ridiculous. They point you to PayPal. They ask you to send a load of money. Nobody fell for that. But then within an hour, we sent out another email pretending to be from their IT department saying, hey, we've just had this phishing email go out. Please nobody click that. But can you go into your Office 365 account and enable what we called phishing protection, which just does not exist. And people dutifully went ahead. They clicked on the link that they'd been sent. They didn't go to an Office 365 portal. They went to something that looked like that, but actually it was our own website. And that's how we got their credentials. And it's really mean because they were doing completely the right thing. But I think doing that made me appreciate what the kind of message we need to use to get through to people to help them understand how much of a risk they are to their own organization if they don't have an appreciation of what hackers are capable of. These guys are criminals. They will do anything to make money. And I think we need to reinforce that point. We get kind of lost in the mystique of hacking and kind of this idea that there's guys with sunglasses sitting at a computer hacking away. It seems kind of cool, or at least, if you're studying ethical hacking, that's how you like to think about it. But really, these guys are just con men. They're not at all pleasant. And we need to start talking to people about hackers, not as these sort of mysterious computer gods, but just thugs with computers and how to protect yourselves against that.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting task for both sides of the project. So, what tasks are you yet to take on in your career that excite you and you're intrigued by?
Well, I think the big one is I haven't yet had a proper job in cybersecurity. So I'm still a mature student. I study full-time and I work at the SBRC part-time. And the course has been wonderful. We've been attacking websites. We've attacked networks. I've also got to do that with the SBRC as well. But I'm really looking forward to taking that next step and doing proper cybersecurity, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, a 9-to-5 job, really getting to grips with an actual live network. One of the things that I find in an academic environment is you're quite often dealing with, you're dealing with a fake network, something that's been set up for you to break. And there's a certain way of doing that. And that's fine, but it would be more interesting to be on a live network, which we get to do with the SBRC. But again, if we're on a live network, we're generally just attacking it. We're running vulnerability scanners. We're trying to find areas where things are broken. We write all that up in the report and we let the company know this is how you fix it. What I'd really like to be is sitting on a network full time and dealing with the realities of a network. As a penetration tester or a security tester, it's really easy to go in someone's organization and say, whoa, this is insecure. You should really fix that. But we really know deep down there's a reason why that's insecure. There's a reason why they haven't been able to patch that system. Maybe they're relying on a piece of software that will no longer, for their business needs, but will no longer work on a patch system. And so they have this huge problem. And it would be much more interesting to work within an organization to solve those kinds of more complex issues. Just because, again, they're more interesting problems. And the other thing I'm really interested in is looking at ways, and this is what I'm working on in my dissertation, is looking at ways of catching those attacks that I talked about earlier, where an attacker is on your network looking for your data, the really scary ones, where they get a bit of malware, they find an entry point into your network, and they will very quietly log on and start poking around and looking at things. And they're very, very difficult to catch as a result. So what I'm looking forward to is actually, I have some ideas myself. I'm working on some stuff in my dissertation, and I'm looking forward to putting that into practice and actually finding more reliable ways of catching those subtle attacks before they can become really serious attacks.
Interesting. So during your studies, what have you found are the most essential skills for an ethical hacker?
A lot of ethical hacking is about research and just kind of keeping up with the news. Cybersecurity is an incredibly dynamic space. Things just change every day. In fact, pretty much every day there's a new technique or vulnerability disclosed somewhere. And it's far too much information to keep on top of. You're never going to be an expert on everything when it comes to cybersecurity. But over time, I've been studying now for 4 years. Most cybersecurity professionals will develop an interest or expertise along certain lines. So maybe you're really into the dark web and you'll become an expert on how to use the dark web, for instance, or maybe your interest would be network security, maybe it'll be against phishing attacks, who knows. The point is, eventually you'll find something that you really want to get involved with. And when you start to specialize, you start to look out for news in that particular area. Most of the time, that just kind of means just following like-minded professionals on Twitter, people who are already share those interests and wait for them to announce something interesting that they found. And then you can go ahead and read their blogs or their papers, or better yet, you can try and replicate their work. So someone might find a vulnerability or discuss a vulnerability that they found in some piece of software. You can just go ahead, download that piece of software, see if you can replicate what they did and see what ramifications of that is. You'll learn a lot about how to be a good hacker. And then you can apply those skills elsewhere. One thing that a lot of cybersecurity, well, not a lot, but quite a few cybersecurity professionals do to either make extra money, or some of them do this as a full-time role, is what we call bug bounties. A lot of large tech firms offer what we call bug bounties, which is where they say, go ahead, attack our software, attack our services. If you find anything, tell us, and then they will pay you some money as a reward. That's the bounty, as it were. And this can be incredibly lucrative. I mean, you do occasionally hear about bounties being paid out in the hundreds of thousands of pounds. Usually it's usually paid out in hundreds of pounds or maybe the thousands of pounds. It's a really good way of keeping your skills sharp, discovering vulnerabilities, and helping these organizations, people like Google, keeping their own services secure. The key thing to consider, though, it's all about research and doing that homework. And it does mean that it kind of blurs the line between you having a job and having a hobby. But if you're the kind of person who's willing to put in a couple of extra hours a week just to learn something new and really keep on top of what's currently happening in the world of cybersecurity, you will be a much, much, much better ethical hacker as a result.
Wow. Yeah. It's definitely, I think it would be such an advantage of the job knowing that you're able to help different big companies who aren't aware of how to do it themselves. Finally, for anyone intrigued by this industry, what advice can you give on how someone can become a successful ethical hacker?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think you might be interested in an ethical hacking career, there's a wealth of material that you can find online to help get you started. I'd actually recommend Googling a website called Try Hack Me, all one word, Try Hack Me. It's a website that teaches you about hacking by actually letting you hack onto their computers. So what they do initially is you log onto their website, there's a training portal, they'll give you some really easy challenges to do. So they'll give you a computer and they'll just handhold you through the first couple of levels, break in, get into this file, change a file, get this piece of data, whatever the challenge happens to be. And as you go through the training, the challenges get harder, you get less help with them, and you'll eventually learn the basics of how to become an ethical hacker. If you didn't enjoy that, then odds are ethical hacking is not for you, and that's absolutely fine, but this costs nothing but your own time. And you will almost undoubtedly learn a few cybersecurity skills along the way, which is always worth doing. However, if you do enjoy it and you want to do more, first of all, Try Hack Me offers some really advanced challenges where you can really test your skills, or you can branch out to other web applications like Hack the Box is a very cool one. It's a lot like Try Hack Me, except the difference with Hack the Box is you have to hack onto the website, first of all, to give yourself access. And then once you've done that, you can do much more difficult challenges. Or there's other things. There's a service called Over the Wire that offers a training regime called Bandit. The key thing about all of this is it's free and it's quite close to what a penetration tester might do. Not exactly. So when you work in actual cybersecurity, you're running much more advanced tools, generally speaking. But doing these kinds of challenges will teach you the basics and give you an indication whether or not you want to be part of this industry. If you're still at school, then I would strongly recommend looking at the UK government Cyber Discovery Programme. It's a scheme that's aimed at trying to get young people into cyber by giving them access to similar cyber challenges and learning materials and things like that. And it leads on to the Cyber First Bursary Scheme. So if you decide you want to study cybersecurity at university, you can enroll in the Cyber First scheme. The government will just pay you a certain amount of money every single year just to study that course. And part of that scheme is to get you in contact with their partner organizations, large organizations across the UK that are looking to employ people with cybersecurity skills. And basically, Cyber First is that connects you with those people. So once you finish your degree, you hand your CVs to these organizations, let them know you've come through Cyber First, and it will really help you get that start in cybersecurity, that first job in cybersecurity. Finally, for those of you who are no longer school children or not studying at university, if you've done a bit of Hack the Box or Try Hack Me and you've decided, actually, yeah, cybersecurity is for me, then I would strongly recommend trying out some of the courses on cybersecurity offered by places like Udemy or Khan Academy. If you look out for deals, you can usually pick these things up for 15 quid, 20 quid, maybe even free sometimes. And it's training material that will lead you to be able to take an exam and actually get a recognized certification in cybersecurity. So things like CREST or CompTIA Security Plus are two of the big ones. There's a kind of a caveat to this. The training material itself is very, very cheap. Usually you can find it for a low cost. You can learn a lot. If you decide that you've got through the training material and you really want to take the plunge, actually doing the certificates themselves can cost a few £100, maybe even £1,000, depending on the certification. It's a big investment, but at that point, you'll have a very good idea of whether or not you want to go in that direction. They're quite difficult certifications to get, but once you have them, they really will open the door to you to get a career in cybersecurity. If you have a bit of IT experience plus that certification, there's a lot of security organizations that will happily take you on at that point. And that will be the first big step that you can take on a career in cybersecurity.
Well, I've definitely learned something new today, and I'm sure our listeners have enjoyed this interesting chat too. Thank you so much, Mo, for giving us such a great insight into ethical hacking.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
It's been great to have you here today. Stay tuned for more episodes from TechFest Talks. Bye for now.